I'm the middle sibling of 3. I have 2 brothers. They both grew up as scouts. My older brother made it to Eagle Scout. My little brother quit some time in Boy Scouts. But for whatever reason, my parents never forced me to become a scout when I was a kid. Which is weird, because I remember always being really jealous of my older brother Scott when my mom would bring me along to the Pinewood Derby contests and celebrations and such. But the thing that I was always the most jealous that I missed out on were the campouts. When the troops would go out into the wilderness and camp out for a whole weekend. I went along for the drive once or twice, and I saw them all setting up, doing campfires and such, but being younger and also not part of the troop, I don't think I was allowed to stay. So I'd go home with my parents. My jealousy of these campouts was mainly towards my older brother because I was growing up watching him prepare for these camping trips. Before every trip, he'd be given a tent to take home and practice setting up in the backyard. Even though I was only like 7 or 8, I remember so clearly how eager I was when I hatched the idea to do a little backyard camping. Basically, we set up the tent in the backyard and sleep in it overnight. To my little mind, that was the most exciting idea ever. Also, our backyard wasn't really a traditional backyard. Our childhood house was in a very spacious neighborhood where yards just kind of all meshed together, and there weren't many fences, more so large patches of trees and brush separating yards, which added to the camping feel. Our backyard was also huge, and we had a fire pit, so our parents played along and set up the fire pit in our backyard for us so we could get the full camping experience. My little brother roasted marshmallows with us too, but our parents weren't going to let him sleep in the tent. He was only like 4 at the time, and it wasn't a good idea. And no, he wasn't a scout yet, obviously. He was 4. After it got a little late, our parents brought him in and told us it was time to start getting ready for sleep. At this time in my life, the Game Boy SP was the handheld console. So after getting into our sleeping bags, Scott and I whipped out our Game Boys and played our respective games. I was playing Super Mario Bros. 2, a game I was obsessed with yet could never beat as a child. After getting a little more tired though, I turned to my side and tried to sleep. But I remember not being able to sleep. Like, I was tired, but restless. Maybe because I'd never slept in a sleeping bag before, and quite frankly, it wasn't comfortable. A lot of time passed, and I mean a lot, before I finally nodded off. And then, I woke up probably confused about where I was at first, not recognizing my surroundings. I remember looking around the dark tent, and then noticing something. Scott was gone. His sleeping bag was empty. The tent zipper was closed though. He must have went inside because he couldn't sleep. I was suddenly too scared to be in the tent alone, so I got up and unzipped the tent. But before crawling out, I did a little innocent peek outside simply because I was too scared to run out through the backyard without checking if the coast was clear. But it was not. I saw someone sitting by the fire pit in the darkness. It wasn't Scott. It was a grown man. He was facing the tent, and surely he had to have seen me. I gasped and zipped the tent back up and crawled back into my sleeping bag, as if that piece of cloth was any form of protection. I stayed completely still inside my sleeping bag. The tent was almost completely dark, just a faint gray from the moonlight coming through the fabric. I don't know what was going through my mind at that point, but I do know that I wanted to call out Dad, just hoping that it was my dad. But I knew it wasn't. I got a look at the man, even just briefly, and if it were my dad, he'd have acknowledged me poking my head out of the tent. And that's when I heard the chair by the fire pit shift. I was shitting bricks, hoping the man didn't get up, and if he did, that he wasn't coming towards the tent. But I could see a shadow now on the other side of the tent blocking some of the moonlight. He was right outside. Somehow, I thought if I didn't move, maybe he would think the tent was empty. Then I heard the zipper, very slowly dragging downward. It only moved a few inches. The opening was small, but it was enough. I couldn't help it. I turned my head just slightly. There's a small gap at the bottom of most tents where the zipper doesn't fully seal. I had never noticed it before that night. An eye was pressed against that gap. Just one eye, looking directly at me. I could see the white of it in the dark. I couldn't even scream at first. Not for a few seconds at least, because I was paralyzed. Then the eye squinted a bit, as if the person was smiling a smile that I couldn't see. The zipper moved another inch, and that's when I finally screamed. I scrambled backwards, kicking out of my sleeping bag, knocking into the tent poles. I heard footsteps immediately take off through the yard. Our back porch light flipped on, which I could see through the tent fabric. My dad burst out the back door yelling. I could hear him running across the grass. By the time he reached the fire pit area, whoever it was already gone. My parents called the police, of course. I don't remember what happened after my parents talked to the cops. I know I went to my parents' room with my mom, and eventually the police did their thing, likely searching the immediate area. It was an absolute nightmare. I slept in my parents' bed that night. I was emotionally scarred for a while. Just as things might have been going back to normal, I think it was a few weeks to a month later, this part is what really hammers the nail in the coffin for this experience being something I can never forget. I went to Catholic school, and during lunch we'd have a short recess in the schoolyard, which was all concrete. The far end of the schoolyard was fenced off and looked towards the street. We were playing some game, maybe red light, green light or something. This part I genuinely don't remember. All I know is I had to run to the fence to be considered safe from whatever the threat in the game was. And while I was on the fence, next to some other kids mind you, a man says hey from the other side of the fence. I turn, and it's a man asking me for directions to some place I don't even remember. I said I don't know. We weren't even supposed to talk to strangers outside of the schoolyard. Then he said, "Your name's Chris, right?" And that moment is implanted in my brain. His voice, the look on his face, and my heart dropping. I said no, lying to him. He then smiled and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And at this point, I ran towards one of the recess chaperones and pointed over at the fence, but the man was gone. One of the kids next to me told me he saw the man too. The recess ladies called the recess in short, and the school called my parents. I was sure it was that man from the backyard. I was taken home early that day. I know my parents were so sick and worried after this. It was a hellish month. We lived in such a nice area too, and to almost be chased out of the neighborhood because of this was just a nightmare. After months of me being under tight supervision from my parents, things went back to normal. I can't express enough, though, how much it still pains me in my chest, thinking about how I could be dead today if that man had somehow successfully taken me, and it makes me sick, wondering if he was ever successful in whatever he was trying to do with someone else. I grew up in Salem, Oregon, a quaint little small-town feeling place. I moved out when I was 21, buying my first house about 50 miles out from Salem. I furnished my first house with a mix of stuff from my parents, their friends, and a bunch of stuff off online marketplaces and apps. I was driving a Ford Raptor at the time, so lugging stuff around was thankfully very easy. On Facebook Marketplace one day, I found a listing selling a bunch of good-looking stuff. The ones in the listing that caught my eye were this cream-colored sectional couch that looked pristine, and this Cannondale brand mountain bike. I didn't have a bike at the time, and where my house is, having one is perfect for exercise. The other stuff on the listing didn't really interest me. The listing itself was just sort of a digital yard sale. I contacted the seller, and we did a little typical back and forth. He was pretty short and straight to the point with his answers, and surprisingly easy to negotiate. He agreed to a slightly lower price, and he said I could come pick this stuff up later that night. Days are long in Oregon in the summer, so I'd still be showing up with some sunlight. I banked on having to do a couple trips to transport the sectional couch due to its size. I set out on my way to the house. The address was right on the coast. I checked the satellite view on the map just to confirm it was bringing me to a house, and it was. Based on the map, there was a long trail or driveway that veered off the road towards a huge open property with a big-looking house, and then in the backyard was a literal drop-off to the ocean. All I could think was, no wonder these people were selling all this stuff for so cheap. With that kind of money, I wondered why they weren't just giving it away. I headed out that way, and it didn't take long to get there. I could tell the closer I got to the shore, the nicer the properties got. And then I turned onto the last road before I'd be turning onto the driveway for the house. This road was long. It was lined with woods on each side, and then I'd pass the occasional driveway leading to probably a cliffside mansion. Eventually, I made it to the turnoff. It was a tree-lined dirt road,